But I want to jump straight in at the deep end, and I want to get your take on what is happening in Ukraine right now.
So, yeah, I think people have to understand that in most conflicts, especially geopolitical conflicts, there's kind of multiple levels of reality, and it doesn't make any level false. It just means that you should also look at what's going on deeper. So, the surface level is Putin invaded Ukraine. Russia is bombing. The propaganda would have you believe they're just indiscriminately bombing hospitals. Reality is probably far less of that. It's probably actually that Russia is going after the Ukrainian troops, Ukrainian military. But either way, the surface level is Russia's bombing Ukraine. What is it Russia wants? Well, they want Ukraine to say they're neutral on NATO. They want the Donbass region to be independent, which many people in the Donbass region are uh, uh, consider themselves Russian, not Ukrainian. And there's been an ongoing war for 8 years in that region of neo-Nazi troops. Some of them with swastikas on their helmets, um, killing, murdering, maiming many people who are native Russian or consider themselves culturally Russian. 15,000 have died over that 8 years. The U.S. and CIA, and you can read some of this at Yahoo News. This is not hidden truth. Has been funding and arming some of these Nazi battalions, like the Azov battalion. And PBS the other day, the U.S. Government, partially government funded outlet here in the U.S. did a fawning interview with a mayor in a city in Ukraine about how tough things are right now, and they blurred out the framed painting behind him of a famed Nazi collaborator.
Wow.
So that shows you how bad this is. But anyway, that's kind of the surface level. Russia does not want NATO expansion, and they want that region independent, and they want their ownership of Crimea acknowledged. That's what they're putting forward as their demands. So that's kind of the surface level. Now you get to a deeper level, and you look at the reality of the situation even deeper. And Russia has been surrounded by NATO, a military alliance. And NATO sounds kind of nice and fluffy to a lot of people that only watch, BBC and CNN. But NATO is a military alliance. They have been behind gut-wrenching wars and bombings like Libya, destroying all of Libya, turning it into warring warlords and open slave markets. That's the type of thing NATO does. So don't kid yourself that NATO is friendly and happy and unicorns. NATO is brutal, war mongering, and a military alliance. So NATO has expanded over the years, closer and closer to Russia. It now involves 30 nations. 17 of them, I believe, encircle Russia, basically. And there are discussions of bringing Ukraine into NATO, or at the very least, having them have some kind of agreement with NATO. To Russia, that is a national security red line. They say they can. I'm just giving their opinion, even though I'm opposed to Putin's invasion. They say they cannot have NATO on their border. Their national security will be shot. They will have NATO missiles pointed at them from miles outside their border. And if you imagine the United States, well, hold on, I'll get to that in a second. I'll get to the analogy in a second. But one more note is, the U.S. has helped fund this neo-Nazi coup that basically neo-Nazi empowered. So it doesn't mean that the entire Ukrainian government's neo-Nazis. The president is in fact Jewish, but the neo-Nazis are basically the powerhouse of the Ukrainian government and their military right now, in that they're just so violent and they're so willing to kill that many of the politicians have to answer to them. Many of the people have to answer to them because they're willing to kill people. And so they have an immense amount of power, even if they don't have the presidency, et cetera. So in 2014, the U.S. helps create a coup in Ukraine. That doesn't mean that there wasn't popular discontent. There was a corrupt president in power in Ukraine, but the U.S. helps do it. They put in place kind of a U.S. Favorable government. And in order to create that coup, the Maidan coup, they empower Nazis. They give them money, training, arms, and that government continues to this day, largely. And during this time in the Donbass region, there is an ongoing war that's killed 15,000 people. And these Nazis will grab Russian speakers and sometimes murder them, sometimes just beat them severely. That type of stuff has been going on. If you talk to refugees in the Donbass region, they say we've been at war for 8 years. Russia has viewed this as completely unacceptable. And something else, I mean, not that you need to explain to people why they should dislike Nazis, but Russia lost 27 million people in World War II to Nazis invading their country. 27 million. The U.S. lost 500,000. So let's just say that Russia is not very favorable to Nazis on their border. So the analogy, just kind of the concluding point, the analogy that works mostly for right now would be if the U.S. were surrounded by a Russian military alliance, similar to NATO, 30 countries, 17 of them around the United States, encircling the United States. And then Russia created a coup in Mexico, put in a Nazi-backed Russian favorable government. And on the border of Mexico and Texas, these Nazis were running around killing anyone who spoke English and was American. And, you know, how would, and there were missiles, Russia was sending missiles, et cetera, to Mexico to point in the direction of the United States. How would the U.S. respond? Do you think we'd respond favorably?
I think the world would be on fire if that was the case right now.
Yeah. So again, it is not that I endorse Russia's invasion, which is seeming increasingly brutal, even though a lot of what we're hearing is propaganda and bullshit. It still doesn't, you know, war is never nice or polite. There are never wars, there are never bombings that just go perfectly and no one that's innocent dies. So that's why I'm opposed to it, because I'm anti-war. But you can also be anti-war and understand why Russia is behaving this way and not just be kind of a child and go, oh, it's because Putin's a maniac and he's Hitler. I mean, that is just incorrect and ill-informed.